Hi everyone, welcome to today's Safety and Health webcast, Women's FR Workwear, the Importance of a Proper Fit, sponsored by Workrite Uniform Company. My name is Tom Music. I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, and I will be moderating today's session. Thank you for joining us. In a few minutes, we'll start the presentation, but first I want to go over some preliminary items. The views of today's speaker and organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the council or magazine endorses those items. At the end of today's webcast, we'll conduct a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply type it in the text box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen and click the button for Submit Question. Feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the Q&A session to begin. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but we might not get to every question. Any unanswered questions at the end of the session will be forwarded along to today's speaker. For basic troubleshooting information, click the Help button located on your screen. At the end of the webcast, you will be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey. I can let you know more about that after the presentation. This webcast will be archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, go to safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Our speaker today will be Mark Sainer. He is the FR Technical Manager for Workrite Uniform Company, a position he has held since he joined the company in 2006. Mark brings more than 35 years of experience in the fire and safety industries to his work, including 29 years in technical support, safety standards, and product development for Akron Brass Manufacturing Company. He participates as a voting member within a number of national and international safety organizations to help develop, revise, influence, and further improve standards for worker safety. Thank you to everyone who is tuning into this presentation. And with that, Mark, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. As Tom said, I'm Mark Sainer, the FR Technical Manager with Workrite Uniform Company, and I'm going to be talking about women's workwear. So in today's presentation, first we'll start off with a few statistics about women in the workplace, talk a little bit about FR clothing needs and why they're needed in various applications, potential compliance issues with garments, a little bit about styling and fit characteristics on women's garments, and then some typical offerings that you can find out there in the marketplace. So with that, let's jump right in and get started. So first statistic I wanted to mention was back in 1970, 38% of the workforce were women, and that has obviously changed over the years. As of 2015, that number has climbed up to over half, 57% participation in the workforce by women. And in certain industries like the oil, gas, petrochem industry, women account for 17% of the workforce. And there's over 290,000 expected by 2035 in that particular industry. So you can see how the participation of women in the workforce has increased over the years. And in the utility industry, we're looking at 22.5% of those workers are women. So it's gone a long ways from back in the early 70s up until today in terms of the number of women in the workforce. And obviously their needs in workwear is different than men in some respects. So let's talk a little bit about FR clothing in general. FR clothing, the reason for it is most severe burns are caused when the clothing ignites, not the original hazard. So if you're not wearing FR clothing and you're exposed to one of these thermal events, non-FR clothing can ignite and burn, and that's really going to cause severe injuries. The burned areas where the clothes were actually are more severely burned than exposed skin. And you can see that in this picture here. It's obvious that this person was wearing a tank top, and you can see at the top and around the shoulders where there was no tank top, the skin doesn't look nearly as burned as those areas where the tank top was, and it ignited and burned. And even on the sides, you can see that there is some melting of the synthetic fibers that is now stuck onto the skin, which is not something you want to have happen. So having something on that's going to ignite and burn is definitely not a good thing. As most people have heard over the years, the cost of a burn injury can well exceed the cost of an FR clothing program. Very costly to go through burn rehab and very expensive hospital stays. Plus, not only is it expensive, but the rehab is extremely long and painful. Burn injuries are one of the most painful injuries that you can sustain, and they do take an extremely long rehab period to try and work your way through getting recovery from a burn injury. So definitely something that you want to try and avoid. And survival rates increase dramatically with a smaller amount of burn injury. And I have a slide later that I'll show you some statistics on that. But the whole idea is when you're exposed to one of these major events, you want to be able to survive. You want to decrease the amount of injury area, and that has a dramatic effect on the chances of survival from one of these major incidents. So why FR in the workplace? Basically protection against clothing ignition. You don't want your clothes to catch on fire. A fabric that does not ignite and continue to burn is what FR fabric is all about. Your regular cotton or polycotton fabrics are going to ignite when they're exposed to these high degree thermal events, whereas the FR fabrics, they do not. They don't ignite, they don't continue to burn, which has an impact on the amount of burn area. They're providing protection against a number of hazards, including arc flash, electric arc flash hazards, as well as flash fire hazard protection. Those are two of the most common thermal events that FR clothing are used to protect against. And as I said, we're trying to minimize the severity and amount of burn injury. FR clothing is not going to prevent burn injury, but it's going to severely minimize the amount and degree of injury to try and keep it as low as possible. All of that correlated with survival rate. It's all about increasing chance of survival. If you're in a major arc flash or a major flash fire event, you're going to get some burn injury. It's just going to happen. There's such a high thermal load that you're going to have some burn injury, but you want to minimize the amount, minimize the severity of it so that you can survive the accident. And I'm going to show you a little video here that shows the difference between FR and non-FR clothing when they're exposed to a fire event. And this is a standardized test, mannequin test that's used in the industry to test FR garments. And you can see the big difference between the three different garments that are being shown. Left, you've got the FR Nomex, middle poly cotton, and cotton, 100% cotton on the right. They're exposed for 3 seconds to the flames, and you can see the vast difference. The Nomex on the left, no fire at all. Cotton's burning, still burning, but in the middle, the poly cotton, it's burning very severely, and if you look closely, you can even see the synthetic polyester dripping, which is also going to stick to the skin. So you want to be the person on the left, not the middle or right. Big difference in the amount of injury you would sustain with those that ignite and do not self-extinguish versus the FR on the left, which is going to self-extinguish. Huge difference. You want to be that person on the left. Your survivability rate will increase dramatically. And this table, this chart shows some survival rates based on some American Burn Association data that is out there. Along the bottom, you've got different age groups because it does have an impact. Your survival rate based on your age is one of the criteria. And then up the left-hand side is the percent chances of survival. So if we look at the purple bar first, that represents 25% body burn. So it's 25% of your body area has either second or third degree burns. And you can see what the high survival rate is. It's pretty much 90% plus that you're going to survive a burn injury if only 25%. And 25% seems like a lot. If you're going to have a lot of burn, if you're going to have burned skin, second and third degree burn, 25 seems like a lot. But if that's a number that you have, high degree of potential that you're going to survive that type of accident. If we jump down to the next bar, which is 50% of your body burn, you can see it's still above the 50% survival rate. Even in the older age group, you're looking at around 60% survival rate, and the younger age groups are over 80% chance of survival. So that kind of 50-50 bar down through the middle, you want to stay above that number in order to make sure you're going to have best chances of survival. So, 25% body burn, really high rate of survival. 50% body burn is still pretty high. You're ranging from 60 to almost 90% chances of survival. Now, what happens when you drop below that 50% body burn number? The green line represents 75% body burn, and you can see how it drops off significantly, particularly in the older age groups. When you're looking at that 50 to 59-year-old age group, you're looking at only a 25% chance of survival. And some of the other ones are down in the 40 and still below 50% survival rate, and those are that really young age group, and it's just barely over 50%. So this tells you that keeping the amount of burn injury on your body to as low as possible is key to trying to make sure you're going to survive an exposure like a flash fire and electric arc flash. And that's exactly what FR clothing is designed to do. Designed to not ignite, not continue to burn, provide some barrier from the thermal energy, and minimize the amount of burn injury, both in severity and the total percentage of your body burn. So what industries are out there that need FR? When we look at this, we look at it based on hazard. So when we look at the flash fire hazard, there's several industries that come to mind that have potential for a flash fire. Petroleum refining, obviously you're working around hazardous materials that can put off flammable gases and vapors that are not good, potential for flash fire. Chemical processing, the same kind of situation. You've got chemicals, liquid chemicals that can put off flammable gases and vapors that are going to be a problem. Oil and gas drilling. Although a lot of the drilling doesn't have this in certain areas, you can open up pockets of gas during the initial drilling setup process that can cause a gas cloud ignite flash fire incident. So another area you want to have your FR clothing for. Mining, same kind of thing. The mining in and of itself may not be a problem, but if you get into a gas pocket that could expose some flammable gases and vapors, that can be a problem. And obviously gas utilities and utility contractors. Anytime you're working around gas pipelines, natural gas pipelines, you're going to have a potential for a flash fire. And then also combustible dust, something that many people don't think about. There's a number of materials out there that in a dust form, when they're in a small enough particle size, if they get lofted into the air, mixed with oxygen, have any kind of an ignition source, you're going to have a flash fire. And we're talking about grain dust, sugar dust, you've got plastics, rubbers, even metals, textiles, wood, coal dust, a lot of different kinds of dust that when they're in a fine enough particle size, they get lofted into the air mixed with oxygen and happen to match up with an ignition source, that you've got the potential for a large flash fire. So a lot of people don't think about those, but they have happened. A number of them have happened over the years. There was a sugar plant that had a large combustible dust explosion, killed a number of people. So it's definitely a hazard out there that you need to be aware of and need to be protected against. When we look at arc flash industries where they need FR clothing, you're looking at electric utilities and utility contractors. Obviously, these folks are working around high voltage electrical equipment. Most of the time it's energized, and so they have to be extremely careful with their work and need some PPE protection. They need the arc flash, arc rated FR clothing to protect against that potential hazard. And in manufacturing, electrical workers. So if you've got electricians, maintenance workers working around, again, high energy, energized equipment, there's always a potential for an electric arc flash, whether it's somebody makes a mistake, you've got an equipment failure. Any of those can cause a devastating arc flash, and having an arc-rated FR garment on that's going to help protect the worker from burning. Again, mining, a lot of electrical equipment in the mining industries. So with those industries talked about, and the fact that there's a lot of women working in those industries these days, let's talk about some of the typical fit issues that women experience when they're not wearing a FR garment that's designed for women. You're looking at garments that were designed for men, so there are going to be some fit issues. Typically a woman doesn't like to wear a man's garment; it just doesn't fit right for them. So, can be too loose, baggy, boxy. Those are common comments that we get from women when they're forced to wear a men's pants, shirt, coverall. They just don't fit right. Too loose, too baggy, and they don't look very good. They can be uncomfortable. The pant rise is going to be different. The fit through the waist and seat is going to be different for a man's anatomy versus a woman's, so that's not going to be comfortable for them to wear during the workday all day long. Sleeves are often too long. The sleeve length for men's shirt or coveralls are sized differently than those for women. Unflattering contoured kind of goes back to that baggy, boxy look. And they just aren't going to be designed and sewn so that they fit the way they should for a woman. And so what all that leads to is potential compliance issues. If the clothes don't fit right, they don't feel right, they don't look right, there's issues that can deal with compliance with standards and the protection that you need for having these garments and the reason you wear the garments. Too baggy, potential for catching on machinery, very potentially dangerous. Doesn't have anything to do with the FR, but the FR is needed, so if you're wearing a baggy, uncomfortable, large garment, potential for catching on machinery and have another type of hazard is quite obvious. Impaired movement doesn't fit right. You can't reach, you can't bend, you can't twist and move properly, so it doesn't work very well in that regard. And then oftentimes, if it doesn't fit right, what is the natural thing to do? Well, you're going to roll your sleeves up. You might have to roll your pant legs, unzip a coverall, and all these can leave exposed skin. They, leave areas. You could uncover some flammable garments, undergarments. Again, all those things that aren't good to do. And then also, they might alter the garment. And the problem with altering is, are they going to use the right materials? Are they going to use inherently flame-resistant thread? Are they going to use the right kinds of fabrics like the original fabric was? So alterations on the garments can be a problem as well. And then lastly, and probably one that's the most dangerous, is they just weren't going to wear them. They don't feel good. They don't fit right. They don't look good. And so they decide just not to wear it. And so that exposes them to those, like the video, the cotton or the polycotton. That's what you're going to end up wearing instead of the FR. And then you've got potential problems for severe injuries. So you look at all those reasons why, compliance reasons why you'd want a garment that's designed for women. It's pretty obvious that it makes sense that you would want to wear something that's going to fit better than wearing something that's designed for a man when it should be designed for a woman. So what are some of the things that you can do and that Workrite has done for styling and fit for a woman? When we look at shirts, there's horizontal darts that contour around the bust area to make it more comfortable and fit better. It's not big and baggy or tight either way. So you've got the contoured horizontal darts in the bust area. You've then also got vertical darts in both the front and the back that fit more the contour of the woman's anatomy, and those are things that you'll see on regular street clothes, that they have these kinds of characteristics and styling attributes. Tapered at the waist, common characteristic of a woman's shirt. Buttons on the left. There's a lot of discussion about why are the buttons on the left versus the right. Don't know if there's a black and white answer for that. One of the stories that I've heard is way back when the women that were from the upper class used to have maids or somebody help them get dressed, and so they were facing each other, and so for the person actually doing the dressing, it was reverse of what if you were dressing yourself. So they flipped the buttons to the other side to make it easier for them to help dress the ladies at that time, and so that's why the buttons were flipped. Don't know if that's the right answer, but regardless, women's are typically the buttons are on the left side instead of on the right, and so that's important just to make sure that it fits like the women like it to, and they can put it on or something they're used to doing. And more contemporary feminine styling. As styling changes over the years, work clothing sometimes doesn't always keep up with the time. So having not only a woman's garment that is designed properly, that has the darts, has the tapered waist, buttons on the left, also want to look at things that are a little more contemporary. How does clothing look this day and age, not from years and years ago. Now, when we look at pants, they also have some specific characteristics for women's styling. Lower rise is typical in a woman's pant. Contoured waistband with darts also, just like the women's shirt having darts in there, and a more contoured waistband to fit their anatomy. Having a different fit to the waist, seat, and thighs that are designed for women, not for men. Again, makes it more comfortable to wear, easier to move, not so tight. And back to the contemporary styling. So if you've got the lower rise, the contoured waist, and a fit that's designed for women through the waist and seat and thighs with a little bit more contemporary styling, that's going to be something that women are going to want to wear. They're not going to forego wearing their safety clothing because they don't like the way it fits or the way it looks. Typical offerings that you will see out there in FR clothing that have a woman's design are things like pants and jeans. And again, you're looking at pants, whether they're work pants or whether they're denim jeans, that have those styling characteristics, that they got the contoured waistband, they've got the fit through the waist and seat, those type of things that those are being offered by many people out in the marketplace today. The shirts, another offering that you can typically find a women's design and styling. And even coveralls. There's specific coverall designs for women that you can find out in the marketplace. And lastly, kind of a new item for many are lab coats that are made in women's design. And that's characteristic because there are a lot of women working in laboratories. Whether they be university laboratories or commercial laboratories, there's a lot of women lab technicians that need a garment that's going to fit properly. And these are all garment types and stylings that Workrite offers, whether it be pant, jeans, shirts, coveralls, lab coats, all made and designed for women to get the kind of fit, styling, design that is being looked for out in the marketplace. So that's the information about women's workwear. I think there's a lot of good things out there, a lot of movement towards trying to help out the women that are working out in the workplace. And because of the increased numbers, we think here at Workrite that it's important that we have products and garments and styles that are best suited for that particular workforce. And at this point, I guess I'll turn it back over to Tom if there's any questions. And if we don't answer your question today, you can go offline to send me at my email that you see here on the screen, msainer@workrite.com. So, Tom, you want to see what kind of questions we've got online?
Sounds good, Mark. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for that presentation. Thought you had a lot of great insights that can help a lot of people and keep a lot of workers more safe. Before we get started with the Q&A session, just want to remind everybody about the evaluation survey that we're asking you to complete. The survey should be appearing on your screen. Your input's important because it will help us improve future webcasts. We do go through and look at your feedback and use that information going forward. If you don't see the evaluation survey on your screen, please turn off your pop-up blocker. That's probably the issue. You may also access the survey by clicking the survey button near the lower right part of your screen. And with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to some questions. So Mark, I will start off. Looks like we have a few. And just a reminder to people, feel free to send questions in as we talk. We'll see those come in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Mark, the first question I see is, do the same safety standards apply to FR clothing for women and men?
Yeah, absolutely. The standards in the marketplace, whether it be flash fire, the NFPA 2112 standard, or whether it be arc flash, the ASTM F1506 standard, they have to do with protection levels. They don't have to do with styling. So yes, if a man's going to be exposed to a flash fire and a woman's going to be exposed to a flash fire, they have the same requirements for the garments in terms of protection levels. Typically, the standards don't get into a lot of the design characteristics. It's all about protection level, coverage, amount of protection that's provided by the garment.
Sounds good. I know we mentioned a lot about fit and styling. So other than fit and styling, what factors should be considered when selecting women's FR workwear?
Well, similar to the first question, when I talk to people about how to choose what's best for them, always start off with what the protection level for the given hazard. Everybody should do a hazard analysis at their workplace, identify what the hazards are, determine the degree of hazard, and then you look for products that are designed for and provide the degree of protection that is available, or that will help them protect against that particular hazard. Once you've identified the hazard and find a product that is well suited for that hazard, then you're looking at things like comfort, which can have to do with either the fabric or the styling, like the women's that we just talked about. And then lastly, look at the value. You want to look at, is this a product that's going to last a long time, that give me my money's worth for what I'm buying? Because it's protective equipment. You want to buy something that not only gives you good protection, but because they're expensive, you want to buy something that's going to last. So you want high quality fabrics that are certified to the standards, that are known to work in the industry, and give you the protection level. But it's all about the protection level. That's the first thing. You want to either be certified to NFPA 2112, or you have to have one that has the appropriate arc rating for the arc flash hazard that you're going to be exposed to.
Mark, the next question that comes in, they want to know your take on unisex garments. Are unisex garments as effective as workwear designed specifically for men or women?
Well, unisex is kind of in my opinion, kind of a misnomer. Typically, a unisex garment would be a man's garment that's worn by a woman. Most, at least the ones I'm familiar with, most of the garments that are sold in the marketplace today are men's garments that are worn by women in some cases. So, it's you can go either way, but it's better if you have a man's garment that's designed for a man's anatomy and a woman's garment that's designed for a woman's anatomy. Unisex will work. The fabric will still give you the same protection level, and it still can be certified to the standards, but you're not going to address those issues that we talked about in terms of fit and are they going to look appropriate so that people will want to wear their safety garments.
Next question that comes in, they want to know, is it possible to tailor the FR garments we already have to provide a better fit for women?
Yeah, that can be done, but it has to be done properly. It has to be done by somebody that knows what they're doing. You have to use the right materials. You have to use inherently FR thread if you're going to, for example, if you're going to hem a cuff, you need to use inherently FR thread, which is what's specified in the standards. If you're going to add additional fabric someplace, you have to use a fabric that's the same as what the base fabric is made from. So you need to be careful about it, but yeah, it can be done. And you can order specialized garments as well. People like, our company, Workrite, we'll make specials. We maybe don't sell a certain size, but if it's needed, we'll make a special size. If we need to make a particularly short sleeve length or a wider waist or something, those kind of specials can be done. They're not inexpensive, but everybody needs to wear their FR clothing. So if you need something, they can be altered. Just have to be careful that you do it right. And I think I've got some information about repairing and replacing garments that addresses that a bit. If somebody needs some information on that specifically, they can let me know.
That notion of ordering specialized garments, that kind of leads into the next question, which is, where can I purchase high-quality FR clothing for women?
Well, Workrite makes women's line, multiple, shirts, pants, jeans, coveralls, lab coats, and we're sold through our distribution network. On our website, there's a place where you can contact the local Workrite rep, and they can direct you to a distributor in the area that sells our clothing, and they all can, buy our women's line. So there's a number of outlets across the country that handle ours, and I'm sure handle others as well.
Another question they want to know about the cost. Is there a difference in cost when you look at men's FR clothing versus women's FR clothing?
Not really. I mean, there might be a slight difference, but you're basically using the same fabrics, the same threads, the same, buttons and snaps and zippers. So, they're basically the same. Might be a slight variation, but not significantly. Obviously, we make higher volumes of men just because of the numbers. There's more men in the workforce than women, but those, as you could see on one of my first slides, those numbers are changing. So there's not a significant difference in them. They're pretty much the same numbers.
Next question that comes in, how important is it to use FR thread when doing alterations?
It's required. If you look at the standards, the NFPA 2112 standard and the ASTM Arc Flash standard F1506, they both specifically spell out it's required to use inherently flame-resistant sewing thread. So that's a requirement. Because if you think about it, say you've got a seam on your pant that's sewn with non-FR thread and it gets in an exposure, there's potential for that thread to burn and open up, and you don't want the seams on your pants opening up when you're in a hazardous environment. So yeah, flame-resistant or inherently flame-resistant threads necessary.
The next question, Mark, that comes in has to do with kind of the lifespan of this equipment. Will FR clothing lose its protection properties over time? And if so, what is the best way of dealing with this issue?
Well, if you're buying, you want to make sure when you're going to buy an FR garment that the manufacturer is using fabrics that are guaranteed to be FR for the life of the garment. And by life of the garment, I mean the garment itself is going to wear out before the FR properties will wear out. And most of the top fabrics that are used out in the marketplace are flame resistant for the life of the garment. Some years ago, there were some that could get washed out if you weren't careful, but most of them are guaranteed. Now, with that said, the caveat is you have to follow the proper care, maintenance, laundry instructions, because there are some things you can do to mess them up. Now, if it's inherently flame-resistant fabric, like either a Aramid blend, a Nomex Aramid blend, or one of the Aramid monocrylic blends, that FR is inherent in the fibers, and you're not going to wash that out. If it's a treated, you're not going to wash it out unless you don't follow the instructions, which specifically say don't use chlorine bleach, don't use peroxides, because those can start to rip out the FR properties in the fibers. So as long as you follow the laundry instructions and buy quality products from quality manufacturers, the FR is going to last as long as the garment's going to last. Most of these industries, they're worn pretty hard, and so you're going to end up, wearing through, tearing. They just get old and don't look good, and you have to replace them. So, the FR is going to last for the life of the garment as long as you're buying those quality fabrics from quality manufacturers.
Sounds good. Next question's a little more technical, so let me know if you want me to read this through a second time. But the questioner asks, with respect to heat stress prevention, what clothing adjustment factors must be considered for workers in calculating the WBGT when wearing FR clothing?
Well, let me just talk about heat stress in general for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out working in the workplace and you're, whatever it is you're doing, you're generating internal heat, and in order to avoid heat stress that needs to dissipate. And it's either going to dissipate just naturally off the body through convection. It's going to leave your body and go away, or it leaves by sweat. Sweat draws the heat off your body and then evaporates and creates some cooling. So a couple things that the garment needs to do, and that is, one, not hold the heat in, so it needs to breathe. It needs to be breathable, allow heat to dissipate off of the body, and it needs to be able to wick the moisture off of your skin and then evaporate quickly. So those are the two key elements in trying to avoid heat stress when you're wearing clothing. Whether it's FR or non-FR, it doesn't matter. Same thing holds true. So lightweight fabrics that are very air permeable, allow that airflow both in and out, help. Fabrics that absorb the moisture well, but also dry quickly. Some absorb well, but don't dry very quickly. So now you get this heavy, wet garment on, which isn't great. So you want it to not only pull the moisture off the skin, but pull it off onto the surface of the fabric and then evaporate quickly is important. And probably more important than what you're wearing is you have to monitor the workers in terms of how long they're working out in hot environments. So if you look at all the heat stress studies, they talk about the importance of rest breaks, hydration, those types of things. So, if you've got your clothes on that are breathable, wick and dry quickly, you still need to do rest breaks, and you still need to have lots of hydration and plenty of fluids. Now, unfortunately, I don't know what WBGT means. I probably should, and I'll look it up after this call. But, those are the heat stress things that I've looked at and studied over the years that are talked about when you look at garments. You generate your own heat, the body does. And when you get into those hot environments, humid environments, sometimes there's nothing you can do. The moisture is not going to evaporate off if you've got very high humidity. If you've got hot wind blowing on you, you're not going to, the breathability is not going to really do anything, because now you're creating heat, not dissipating heat. So there's lots of variables involved with it. But in general, lightweight, lighter colors, breathable fabrics, moisture management characteristics in terms of wicking and drying quickly are the kinds of things you look for when you're looking at garments that are going to be used in hot environments.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know heat stress is an issue that's not going away anytime soon also. So I had a couple more
we hear about it a lot.
Yeah. The questioner clarified for WBGT, wet bulb globe temperature is what that was in reference to.
I'm familiar with that testing, but I don't have any specific numbers on it. Again, I've done a presentation and even a webinar on heat stress that you can find on the Workrite website, but that specifically, I don't know the answer to that bulb globe testing.
Gotcha. Another question comes in having to do with outerwear. Are there any women's FR outerwear on the market?
That's a good question. I know that we have looked at outerwear for women. I don't believe at this point in time that we have any that are specific to women, but I know that's in our development area that they're looking at what we should do for that. But at this point in time, that's not something that we see a lot about or see much of, and Workrite hasn't developed one yet. I know we've got that on our lists of things to do, but at this point in time, we don't have anything that fits that particular need.
I guess I'll wrap it up with this. You've got almost 40 years of experience, obviously an expert in this field. Where do you see this going? And when you look at companies and individuals maybe who don't have proper fit, who don't differentiate with their garments, what do you think the reason is for that? Is it just lack of understanding or education, or I guess it's kind of a two-part question. Why is this an issue, and kind of where are the trends going forward, do you think?
Well, we obviously have seen an increase in the people asking for women-specific garments, and that's why we've done some redesigns, and we've expanded our line to cover more styles and types of garments because we think there's a need. And as you saw in the statistics, the number of women in the workforce has been increasing over the years, so there's a growing need for it. I would guess the reason others haven't really gone there is it's a cost factor. When you have, you can only make so many styles, so many SKUs. Got inventory control that you're trying to manage, cost controls and so forth. So the more styles and more designs and more types of garments you have, the harder it is to manage that. And so, depends on where your priorities are. If your priorities are on inventory control, then, you go one direction. If your priorities are on trying to meet the needs of the marketplace, then you go a different direction. And that's kind of where Workrite's headed, to try and fulfill that need. And, it's probably been a long time coming for most in the industry to have more options for women and more styles and designs. We've seen the need and have started moving that direction, and I would guess that'll continue.
Have another question come in, and thanks to everyone who's taken the time to send in some questions, some really good ones today. Next question is, will wearing something like a non-FR rain jacket over an FR shirt disqualify the protection provided by the FR shirt?
Absolutely. That is a number one no-no. The outer layer must always be FR. Never want to put on a non-FR over top of an FR, particularly a rain jacket. If that catches on fire, you're in deep trouble. Because think about it, if you've got this garment burning on you, even though you've got FR underneath, that thermal energy is still going to go through that garment, plus you've got flames and stuff up around your face. And yeah, absolutely, the outer layer must always be FR. And if you look in some of the standards, it specifically spells that out. Windbreakers, jackets, rainwear, none of that should be non-FR. It all has to be FR, or you've got some serious potential problems in an exposure.
Yeah, definitely an important clarification, and I know with some of the images you showed, you can see the damage that can happen, and it sure doesn't take long, just a matter of seconds if you're wearing the wrong garment.
Well, if you think about it, an arc flash is, at 10,000 plus degrees. It only lasts for a fraction of a second, but it's such a high thermal energy that anything that's non-FR is likely to ignite immediately, and then you got a problem. You're going to be one of those two mannequins on the middle and right, where you're going to be burning like a candle, and that's not a good thing.
Well, Mark, actually, there's one more question coming in, so that's good. Keep them coming. We have the time. Next question says, let me make sure I get this correct. What size charts are you looking at when shaping patterns for women's protective apparel, women's or plus size? What are the body measurements of typical women working in these fields? Because the plus size market for all clothing is growing. So just making that, it's kind of an interesting approach. What's your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, the way we do it, and I don't know if I have an answer that's specific to the question asked, but the way Workrite does it is we have take a size, a average size. I don't know if average is the right word or not, but we take a size and have a particular measurement chart that we go by, and then as the size increases, everything is graded to increase appropriately. So, we would take a standardized pant, for example, and maybe this will help answer the questions. We're part of the Williamson-Dickey manufacturing company, so Dickey's makes a lot of workwear, so we can take one of their designs, their sizing styles, and then we grade it appropriately as the size gets bigger. So if you're in take a size 10 and then it goes up from there, everything is graded in terms of the size of the thighs or the size of the waist or the size of the rise or whatever it might be, increases accordingly to match size that it's going from and to. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, and we also use fit models. We'll bring in a fit model that has kind of a normal, whatever that means, typical physique, and make sure that they fit well, and then again, size appropriately as they move up and down in sizes with varying degrees of fit change that's needed, the grading that's needed.
Mm-hmm. Got an interesting one here. Do you know of any reports of allergic reactions to FR fabrics?
I don't know of any reports. It comes up periodically. It's rare. Most of the fabrics have all been evaluated for skin contact irritation type things. Every once in a while, I'll hear of somebody that has a reaction to one of the fabrics. Typically, it has to do with the finish that's on the garment itself, and after several washings, that tends to the finish itself. It's called sizing that's put on there to make the fabric easier to handle in the manufacturing process. But after a few launderings, that goes away, and sometimes that's the cause. But in general, we don't see issues with allergic skin reactions. But as I said, every once in a while we'll run across one, and usually what happens is they'll just change to a different fabric, and that takes care of the problem. But generally speaking, there haven't been issues with it. I don't know of any reports specific to that, but in the thousands and thousands of garments we sell, we rarely run into that issue.
Yeah, that's interesting. Got a couple more. In previous years, prior to the OSHA requirements for oil and gas to utilize FR, it sometimes took up to 6 to 8 weeks to receive FR clothing. Has the time it takes to receive the clothing reduced?
Yeah, well, can't speak for others in the industry, but we at Workrite carry heavy inventories to try and be able to ship products with, standardized products. Now, if you're looking at something that's odd or not in the normal size ranges that we show in our catalogs and price lists, those typically we would inventory and are going to ship somewhere in, the week to 10 days or less. A lot of them we have on stock. If you order it today, we'll ship it tomorrow or within a couple of days. So part of it depends on, because we carry such a broad line of different styles and fabrics, we can't carry everything in stock, but all the high volume stuff are going to ship very quickly. So it would be rare that you're going to be waiting, 7, 8, 9 weeks for a product. And we can certainly tell somebody that when they want to place an order. But most of the inventory in these days are pretty healthy, and the standard products that are being sold, standard coveralls and standard colors, and in size ranges that are stipulated. If you want a 8X, then that's going to take a little longer because we'll have to make it from scratch. But most of the normal size ranges and colors and styles are in stock and can ship pretty quickly.
And another question here. How do we obtain women's FR clothing from Workrite if our local vendor only offers the men's line from Workrite?
Well, that's a good question. We have lots of suppliers around the country, lots of distributors that we can direct somebody to. So if it just happens to be that distributor that's in your town or the next town over doesn't want to carry them, we can certainly find somebody that'll carry them for you and figure that out. So I would just, again, go on our website and look for the rep that covers your area, your region of the country, and I'm sure they can find somebody that can help them get the garments, because we sell to lots of different distributors across the country, and even some of the industrial laundries have direct sale catalogs that would carry our garments. So I'm sure we can find some outlet where they can get the women's garments.
Well, Mark, I appreciate it. We answered a bunch of questions there. A lot of good ones came in, and just thanks again for your expertise and your presentation. Definitely was interesting. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, you know what? With that, that'll wrap up our presentation for today. Once again, any unanswered questions or questions that follow, we'll make sure to forward those on to Mark. And want to remind everyone one more time just to go ahead and take the time to fill out the evaluation survey on your screen and give us your feedback. That does really help us out. That's going to go ahead and end today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. Once again, I'd like to thank Mark Sainer, everyone at Workrite Uniform Company, and all of you who listened in and participated in the Q&A session. Thank you very much, and have a great day.